Hello there, hi, and welcome to Butterfly Effect, a podcast all about interviewing people. I'm your host, Tristan Ettleman, and it was another brief hiatus, but we're back, and two for the price of one, basically. My guests today are the founders and operators of Dinosaur Polo Club, an independent game development studio out in New Zealand. Peter and Robert Curry, and they were kind enough to come on and talk about their game Mini Metro, a whole bunch, which is I'm a huge fan of the game, and they keep finding great success with it, and they have a really interesting story. They came to the indie scene years ago and then left it and then came back. So there's a whole wave there that I think is probably more representative of not only indie game development, but indie anything or indie successes or anything like that. You can find probably a similar thing. People don't just come out of nowhere. They work really hard, and hopefully one thing comes around, and that's when you hear about them. So yeah, I was just glad Peter and Robert were able to talk, and I, to be honest, felt a little down and out, because I was a little sick and I just wasn't thinking straight. So I felt like I wasn't doing my best job. But, you're always your own worst critic. And I still had a good time talking. I just felt like I could have not pushed harder, but found some different threads. But, it doesn't matter. I just think too much about these things. So yeah, it was a great conversation. So check out Mini Metro, and I'm excited to see what they do next. They said that they're doing something totally different, so that gets me excited. Other than that, nothing has been happening except that I got a new job, and so that changes the kind of I had been working from home previously, so that changes the whole dynamic, and I'm in an office, and I'm enjoying it. It's good. It's a good, stable, pretty fun job. So, yeah, that's pretty much there's all I'm busier now, but there's more stuff coming around the bend, more projects and the like, and so I never have stopped doing that. But if you I do want to plug one thing I'm doing. I write these weekly film essays, little because they're not necessarily reviews. Some of them delve deeper into like analyzing the film's quality, but some of them are just kind of historical context, and yeah, the essays is the best word for them. And I'm writing those over on Medium.com. Tristan Ettleman is my username, so that's easy to find, and I have this whole elaborate system where I'm watching the entire history of film, and I pick my 5 favorites from each year. So, and that's on Mubi.com, which is also a fantastic site, and all this is linked on the Medium articles and stuff like that. But and so the essays are dealing with each of those. So right now I'm still writing my way through 1901, which was a long time ago, and I'm only watching my way through 1922. So at some point I'm going to catch up with myself, which will actually be kind of better. And but in the meantime, I'm writing them pretty weekly. That's still like 110 more that I got to do or whatever. That's more than 2 years at one a week. So I think I've created an endless thing for myself, and mostly it's just to kind of hone my writing skills, and especially specifically about film, which is something I've really started to become very interested in. I'd always liked movies, but the craft and the history is something that's really I've become taken with recently, and I think that's reflected in some of the guests I've had on recently and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wanted to branch out, so check that out if you get a chance. And I've talked long enough. Let's talk to Peter and Robert. See you on the other side. What's new with Dinosaur Polo Club and I guess Mini Metro in particular just recently? What have you guys been up to?
Well, I guess the big thing in the last few months we've been expanding. So it's just been me and my brother and two other contractors working on the game for the last 3.5 years now. Yeah,
I think it's pretty close to 4.
Yeah. I think it's turned 4 this April. So as it's running, we've hired a producer. We hired her 3 months ago, and now we're still going to be hiring an experienced programmer, probably coming on board in
mid this year.
Yeah, June, I think. And we've done out another game as well, which will be starting in about June as well. Yeah. So things are progressing from just being that Mini Metro team onto actually being a fully fledged studio, which is kind of a strange thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been, I guess, just the two. You mentioned the contractors. Richard Vreeland, who I've talked to for this, did the music obviously on that show, and he's a cool guy. And I think the music is one of the defining things about Mini Metro. So that's cool that you were able to work with him and make that partnership, I guess. Uh-oh. Am I cutting out?
Yes, we want to have a completely procedural video. We might just turn the video off. Yeah.
Okay.
So we just got in touch with... Yeah. Is that all good now?
I think we're back to stable.
Is that better?
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so we just reached out to Rich because we knew he was into procedural audio, and we wanted to have a completely procedural audio. And I mean, we just kind of began at the top, and he said yes. So we were really happy with that. He saw the game as a kind of a worthwhile palette for him to kind of work with.
Yeah, which I think is what he looks for in whatever he gets involved with. Is just if there's something interesting he can do with it, then he'll be on board. So, and he saw obviously something interesting with us. And he put so much more than we were expecting. Yeah. He invested so much of his own energy and time into it. It was incredible. Yeah, it was really neat to work. So it is always cool to work with really talented people in other areas, and just see what they can do. It's pretty awesome to work alongside him.
And you didn't really know much about musical theory or anything, and he just...
Yeah, I definitely had to learn a lot from what he wanted me to do. The way he wanted to manipulate the audio, the information he wanted to get out of the game, how he wanted to use that information to influence it. And he definitely had to drill down into some quite technical audio terms that I had no understanding of whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, I talked to him about it. It's very ethereal, and I guess that's the one word you can kind of use to describe his work. But it's just so different from everything else he's done, and each thing is different. His chiptune type stuff to the synthy stuff for It Follows, and then Mini Metro. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So how did you guys get started? I guess maybe even before you got actually a career going as children, was there an artistic environment at home where you got? I mean, I would imagine you guys were playing a lot of video games to kind of inspire you down this path.
Video games we didn't really get into until early teens. I think we got our first computer at 13, and before then we were mainly playing outside or watching TV.
But we had I think from that point on, we had the sort of standard white middle class thing of the family gets the computer to do homework on or whatever, and then of course what we do want is find the stuff, find the computer games to play. So that was straight in. That was a 386 SX33 with 2 megs of RAM and an 80 meg hard drive. Yeah, and that had Wolfenstein 3 and Kind of King 4, and I think that was the 2. The Secret Gen. Yeah, that's right. Cosmos Good stuff.
And so we were always really interested in computer games and video games and all kinds of games anyway. So I went to university and did computer science, and we were always kind of working on our own stuff, but it was just more like mucking around. I don't think we ever intended to finish anything or had any sort of ambition that went just past mucking around. Anyway, we got a first job straight out of university at She Interactive, now Pickpock, which so there we worked on sports games. I was there for 3.5 years. You were there for 4.5.
Yeah,
you began a year before I did.
So that was Rugby League,
Rugby League 2, Melbourne Cup Challenge. Yeah, so like horse racing and rugby league games. And
those for Xbox, PlayStation 2, PC.
Yeah. So way back anyway. And then we thought we'd go indie. So that was back in 2006. I thought it was August 2006 was when we left. It was us and this friend of ours, Lloyd. And I think we managed to pretend we were going to be in the studio for 18 months before we called it a day.
Yeah.
We were going to do, but back in those days, this was before the App Store was out I think iPhones were out, but the App Store wasn't. Steam wasn't doing indie stuff. So the indie stuff of the day was sort of all self-sold on your website. Things like World of Goo, that pixel art,
Cortex Command.
Cortex Command, that was the one, yeah. So games kind of like that. And we were sort of aiming to do a really sort of lo-fi indie MMO, which sounds ridiculous, but
I don't know.
there were MMOs at that stage with about 1,000 subscribers or so that were very kind of niche things. So we were aiming to make one of those, but we just didn't have a clue.
Well, it's a very different time in indie games because that was the whole online subscription model was one of the few ones that had quite a few examples of successful businesses. So there was Yo-Ho-Ho, Puzzle Pirates, A Tale in the
Desert, that's right. Yeah.
And there were a number of other ones. And that was also the heyday of Eve. Not heyday, but that was when Eve was coming into its own, and so that was the market model that was actually the most reliable.
Yeah, but we didn't really know how to build a game from the ground up. I think we spent almost all the time on engines and stuff, because also that was before engines were a very easy to use thing, or they were very expensive and not very good.
They weren't commoditized like yeah. So we spent a lot of time on an engine and not a lot of time on an actual game.
I remember we were thinking about the game a lot, but we never began to sort of experiment with that.
We never had a realistic plan to actually get it done. It was always it's always very theoretical.
So those 18 months were quite valuable in teaching us about how you have to actually run a business and what you don't do.
Right.
So then I think after then we kind of broke up and did sort of web. I got into the web industry where I stayed for about 5 years, and you began doing like sort of game
contracting, doing game-like stuff. Yeah.
So what was the idea for the indie MMO?
It was based on the auction house of World of Warcraft. We just found that to be. I mean, I found that to be a very interesting thing just in itself.
So you had to run a business. And WoW.
Yeah, you know.
So you had to find a part that you could play in the world economy.
Yeah. So we were trying to build an economic strategy game that would have sort of the main element would be the engagement through auction houses and that kind of thing. So it was a
cooperative, theoretically cooperative non-combat space exploration and economic strategy game.
Yeah. I still think it was a pretty good idea, but we just didn't have we just didn't invest anything in like working out the gameplay or these kind of very fundamental questions. We just and that was about it.
Yeah, but it was based around this whole idea that your avatar was a planet, effectively. So rather than controlling one person, you'd control a planet, and it always started off with. So you build a Ein, and then somehow that evolves into a whole game.
I guess when I think about it, it's probably like Anno Online. Thinking about it now, it's that kind of thing. So like a Sim City maybe style, but like / Civilization Online. This is probably more thought that we put into it than we ever did. But anyway, So, and then from there, we just started working on games in our spare time. I was kind of put off the industry a bit, just doing other things. But Pete always kind of wanted to become an indie game developer, right? And then
I was hesitant getting back into it because it had been so long since. It hit this point where it had been about, I think it was over 5 years since a game that I had worked on had released. So I thought, I can't realistically keep calling myself a game developer if I haven't actually built anything. Of course, in the birth of the modern indie scene had happened the whole time we were out of games.
Yeah, it was like once we left, everything.
Yeah, that's really funny. That's kind of it's interesting because it sounds like. I mean, how was your experience? I guess I don't know how to pronounce it. The seed side.
It's pronounced. It's the most awkward name because you can't. It doesn't sound like it's written down, so you always have to. Yeah, it's a confusing name.
Well, so they're like the biggest, or they were. I guess I don't know what they're like now, but they were like the biggest developer in New Zealand, and I don't know if that's AAA or what. But I mean, you had like how was that experience there? Was it something that kind of put you off while you were there? Was it very corporate, working on something you didn't really want to work on?
So back when we were there, it was kind of a AA studio, which doesn't really exist anymore, I suppose, in the industry. So they would kind of work for hire to doing sort of second tier sports games.
There was no way they could compete with EA on any of the big budget stuff, but that was all. Yeah, so they would pick up contracts to develop the Australian sports games.
Well, did they do one game that was like really? Did they do Shatter?
Yes. So they did release games by themselves as well. Yeah, Grip Shift on the PSP,
right,
Shatter, and then there was
So
one about the condo.
Grip Shift. That was when they started moving into.
Of course, into iPhone.
Because since when we left, so I worked on Grip Shift. Jatta was worked on after we left. So, and then since we've left, they've really branched out into their own IP. So now they're an iPhone developer primarily.
And I think there's the second biggest in the country after Grinding Gear Games.
I think I don't know. It gets a bit hazy now because there are a few other big studios now.
So they're now called Pickpock, and they're about 80 to 100. And I think Grinding Gear Games is 93. Anyway, so now I think they do all their own IP on iPhone and Android.
Yeah, but it was good. It was a good experience. I mean, that was how we learned. We learned how to make games there. I didn't have a clue. When I think of how useful I was coming out of university, it's amazing. I was there for as long as I was. I was definitely a lot more useful, a lot more productive by the time we left them.
I think heading into your first studio job, I mean, you just learn so much just about how production works, how everyone else works, how to work in a team, how to communicate, just all these things that you really need to have.
Especially coming out of a comp sci degree, you learn how to work with artists and people who aren't just software developers. Get a feel for.
So it really does surprise me that people can come out of a comp sci degree and go straight into indie. You'd have to just learn so much on your own dime.
Well, I feel like I think people hear the term indie and think, oh, they came out of nowhere. But I've talked to a few indie developers, and you look into the story like, oh, they actually worked at a bunch of places, or they were contractors, or I guess maybe now especially people do just come right out of college, or they're in college, or in doing it, and make a game or whatever. But it seems like a lot of people have this kind of background of working at either a double A or a triple A, some kind of bigger studio at least, or something that had more structure than an independent team. And like you said, it's something that's really valuable.
Yeah, I think now that kind of game schools are a bigger thing, I think that kind of gives people a little bit more of a leg up in becoming an indie straight off the bat, for sure. But yeah, 5 or 10 years ago, that just didn't really exist. So you just had to learn it all in the old school studio model somehow.
Yeah. Well, I guess it speaks to some kind of drive or determination from you guys that you went to work in video games, and you're working within a studio, you went independent, it didn't work out, and then you guys came back to it, because, usually you don't hear that comeback necessarily, of like, well, we stopped and then that was it, or you hear people go indie and they are massive successes, but you guys had like a delayed start, it sounds like.
That is accurate. I was talking to a guy at GDC a few weeks ago, and he was quite shocked at how old I was. I mean, I'm only 36, but in sort of indies that can seem reasonably old.
Sure.
And he said that it was really cool to see someone of my age,
older folk,
the industry. And I think if I was in a worse mood, I could have been offended by it. But I got what he was saying, but I don't think it quite came across in the same way he was expecting it to be heard. But I know. I think it was by accident on my part anyway. I mean, Pete, it was kind of much more of your sort of efforts that really pulled us back into it.
Yeah, because excuse me. At the time, that was May 2013. So I was a stay-at-home father at that point, looking after our 1-year-old son. Yes, he was 1. He was coming up to 1 at the time, and I realised, like I was saying, I sort of wanted to release something. I didn't necessarily want to have a career in indie games, but at least wanted to make something. And I realised when we prototyped Mini Metro and decided to proceed with full production, to turn it into a commercial release, I realised that was sort of my last swing with the bat. The limited time you have when you're a parent, really eats into anything, any hobbies, especially part-time game development, which is always, that's hard at the best of times. So I knew, regardless of what happened, this would be my last shot.
And I think because of the way you were very conscious of your time restraints, you sort of put down some rules as to what kind of game I can actually make, and that was the first time we'd actually thought about our constraints. So at that stage we didn't have artists, so we thought, right, well, we just can't do a game with art. Like it has to have very, very simple art. There weren't heaps of us, so it had to be a game that you could play over and over again and be completely procedural. So once you kind of listed down all of the things that we couldn't do, that then gave us a much better idea about what we could do. And then we just had a bunch of ideas, and then I just had this idea about an interactive map, and then that just went from there. So I do really feel like that without Pete sort of listing down, what we were actually able to get done, that we probably would have ended up doing some ridiculously overscoped thing like we always did, and not actually got anything done.
So because we were talking quite
about
a larger strategy game, and that we were both quite excited about.
But I think we both understood that if we begin on this, it's not going to get done.
Yeah, it hit this point when we realized like this is going to be another multi-year thing. It probably won't ever get released. But
yeah, and then even when we did pick a game that we could get done in 2 days for a game jam, it still took 2.5 years to get it released.
And we're still working on it now.
Yeah, so like even the most simple thing we could think of has still been years and years of our lives. So.
Well, it seems like it's a good process, though. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Zoink games in Sweden, but their kind of trajectory just reminds me of yours in that they were a game developer spawning out from a relatively AAA environment, and then didn't really get a good go of it. Did like commercial work and animation work, and then came back to games, and now they're having a resurgence. They were on EA's stage and stuff like that, and with the Faye game and stuff like that. So it's just I think that the concept of like instant indie success is kind of sold a lot, or is very sexy or whatever, and so you always hear that. But I think stories like that where it's like, yeah, we worked hard and it sucked sometimes, but I just think that's not really understood about games, especially like indie development where there's 2 people involved, or even people that make games on their own. So
yeah, I think it's a very seductive story. Yeah, that kind of thing where we're just working on this thing, and then it's now awesome, and now anyone can do it. And I mean, anyone can, obviously, like that stuff does happen. But
sure.
We don't hear the stories of the thousands of games that didn't quite get that far, or they did get released and then didn't really do anything,
like you're saying, everything that happens with successful people before they have their success. I mean, it's very, very infrequently does stuff spring out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like when you're successful, you become visible, and when you're not successful, of course, no one really thinks anything of you or anything. I mean, they just don't even know that you exist. But it's like, behind every success, there is years and years of sort of invisible failure or invisible work that often doesn't really get the light shone on it.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the point of the show, is talking about those stories and stuff. But I guess did Dinosaur Polo Club as a studio form around the idea of we want to make games, or did it form after you had the idea for Mini Metro or for a specific game?
So we had Mini Metro. We were brainstorming ideas. We came up with Mini Metro. We prototyped that in a game jam, and then when we decided to continue to develop it and commercially release it, that was when we thought, I guess we should have a studio now. But it was always just there to support development, just to have a brand to wrap Metro around. So we didn't like form Dinosaur Polo Club and then get funding and try to figure.
You'd be like, well, what are we gonna make? It was the other way around.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we did come at it backwards. It's like we only really started taking it seriously when we'd already had seen that our game could work. I don't think either of us are at the stage of our lives where we were prepared to, sink 3 years and however much to kind of see if we could become a success. It was only sort of after we'd already seen it was very likely to happen that we kind of thought, okay, let's become some game developers since we now have the game.
Yeah, I guess most games have a kind of a long dev cycle, but you did say that there's a lot of invisible work, but I feel like Mini Metro's development was pretty visible in terms of, I mean, you guys did early access, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I just mean kind of more of just all of your things that you've done earlier that didn't come to anything.
Sure.
It was basically us doing things for like 10 years that didn't amount to anything that made us think, right, we have to do something that's actually
But you need that.
finishable.
You need to. Well, I mean, some people need more failures to stand on than others. So some people might have a lot easier way through than us. But
I think in terms of Mini Metro itself, like from when it began until now, the process itself was relatively painless. So we just spitballed the idea together. We kind of came up with it in about an hour of talking about what we were going to do. And then we just implemented what we thought, and we ended up with a really good game. And there was no sort of iteration over the idea or anything. It just sort of sprung full formed.
there was quite a bit of iteration during early access. Sorry, before early access.
Yeah. But the actual idea itself, it just worked. Like we just said, how about we have shapes and passengers and da-da-da, and we implemented it. It's like, that's actually quite fun. But I'd say in about 8 months or so after the game jam before early access? How long was that time? I can't remember.
No, it was more than that. It was May 2013 to August 2014.
Okay, yeah. That time was when we really worked on how do we turn this kernel of an idea into an actual game we can charge money for. And we were, that was that was pretty public, but we weren't really high profile then.
Sure.
Because we had the game really freely playable on the website at that point.
Yeah.
And so we had quite a big community playing it, especially once we put it on Greenlight. That got a lot of
that exploded. Yeah, we were going from five hits a day on the website to about 30,000 or so. Yeah, so that was huge. That was massive.
So it was difficult making sweeping gameplay changes to try things out, just to experiment. Got people playing. Because even though they understand it's in development and people get very attached to mechanics and they think that the game, like, if they fall in love with the game, with Alpha 8, and then you put out Alpha 8B the next week, which all of a sudden is quite different, is quite a big departure, you get a lot of angry reaction to that.
I feel like there's maybe a misunderstanding of what early access is in terms of they're thinking they're getting a full-fledged game early rather than getting literally an early game, a game early in development.
It's because I mean this was even like before early access. I mean this was just us on our website.
Right. I'm glad that was before early access, because when games you see when games in early access do that and iterate quite heavily, that you can get terrible feedback from that. And the classic example is Darkest Dungeon. When they did
the corpse thing.
Yes, they introduced the corpse thing, which they're always intending to add in. But as soon as they do it, it's like, oh my god, ruined the game, and
which is also, that game is amazing too.
Yeah, and John Lenbay, who's the community manager, he spoke at GDC about exactly that stuff, about how difficult it can be to try to manage a community during active development.
Yeah.
And the perils of early access. So thankfully we got all of those open development issues out of the way before we launched as a paid product on Steam. So the core design was pretty much nailed down.
We
did access.
Yeah.
And then we became the perfect game for early access, because it was mainly just adding features, not iterating on existing features, and adding content. And
I think we really learnt that, at least from our experience, the experience that we had, that early access is best done when you're only sort of content filling, and because otherwise, if you're ever kind of moving or altering things, it's terrible. We did change the map screen once, and we just got so many complaints about it.
Well, we removed the maps from the map screen.
Yeah. Which kind of made our job a lot easier, but then we did realise that it probably did make it. But it's the kind of thing where if we'd launched like that, it probably would have been. I mean, if we'd launched before, that probably would have been fine. It's just that everyone was
giving us
used to how it was, and they were like, "Well, that's not the match screen now. What's going on?"
Well, and it's very difficult to actually assess feedback objectively, especially. I think it's probably easier with a bigger team. You can have people that are there to advocate for the players. But when you're a very small team and you don't have that, it's very easy to take criticism of your decisions personally. And it's impossible to think in any way objectively about the game. Because it's just this entity that you spend so much time on, and you can't think of what it's like to experience it for the first time, or to experience it and not know intimately how it all functions.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well, when you get feedback, you don't know if it's coming from a genuine complaint or just this isn't the way it was and I want it back.
Right.
Like you can't really tell that. Yeah.
I mean, I think we made the right decision in backing away from the map screen, for example. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that we probably put our foot down when we shouldn't have, or should have backed off on some things.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm not like a historian or a scholar of early access or things that are open development in general. But I feel like just from the outside, and not being someone who was playing the game at the time or making it, that you seem to have a pretty successful arc of it, because there's other games where, I mean, they're still in early access and they're, not that there's nothing getting done, but it just seems it's just a narrative or a thing that kind of trickles away, whereas I think you guys were in it long enough to kind of build rather than build and then subside again, and then the game came out and then it went bigger because then the full product was out and everything. I don't know, was there a conscious decision to be like, we can't let it go too long, or did you just think when it's done, it's done?
I think we set a pretty clear goal on what we wanted to get done to
declare it done.
To have a release game, yeah. So we wanted to add up to 10 maps. We had some more game modes, and I think once they were done, we were like, right, well, that's it now. The big
one was audio.
Oh, I forgot we didn't have audio for the longest time. That's right. Because Rich meant to do it earlier, but then it became a much higher priority, so that kind of shelved it for a wee while, and then I mean it had a long development time anyway, so that
Well, so we were in early access from August 2014 to November 2015, so it wasn't too long.
Right.
But as Rob was saying, we had a very clear idea of the work we wanted to get done before we considered it released. We only went into early access because we needed the money, which is not a good idea is not a good way to decide when to commercially release your game.
Sure.
And thankfully that paid off, and that is one of the reasons why the game had I think a relatively smooth progression through early access. Is from the moment we released on it, it's paid well. We had a good release on it, and I think that good release is due to the fact that we had a big community established already before we were up on Steam.
Right. And everything did seem to go well just by accident.
Yes, it did.
It just happened to all really work out.
There were a few key decisions that, in hindsight, we made well, and I'd love to claim credit for thinking them through, but I can't, in all honesty.
Well, yeah. I mean, in any kind of I guess it's similar to kind of a crowdfunding kind of strategy or something, but to some extent, you can do what you can, and then it's in the hands of the people, literally. But I think you're selling yourselves short in that, I think that you came to early access, you said, because you needed the money, but there are people and organizations that will ship or a game or do early access, whatever, for that reason, but not to continue it, if that makes any sense. It feels disingenuous. Whereas I think what was made clear by your earlier community building through your website, open development and everything, I think made clear that, look, we're doing this so we can keep this going and make it good. So I think even just in that regard, probably helped along the success during that period anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we were fairly confident it would be a commercial success, just given the number of players that were getting it as a free game. But of course, there's a big step between having people go to your website and play for half an hour and actually asking them to pay you. So we were never...
Yeah.
But it never entered my mind until afterwards, I think, just looking back on it, that it may not have been a commercial success. It may have been a fraction of what it did, which wouldn't have been able to sustain either of us full time. And if that had happened, then Minimetro may have had a very different trajectory through early access, because at that point you can't justify spending full time working on it,
and that's the risk, isn't it? It's like when you're saying, even though early access does have that big thing that's saying, if you aren't happy with this game right now, and if nothing else happened on it ever, you should still be okay buying it. No one really reads that or actually believes that's the way it is. So then you start selling the potential of this thing, and if not enough people buy into it, then you're just left having to finish this game and not being paid enough for it, and it can be a hairy thing if that ends up happening. Yeah, because then you just have to sort of rush it done or just forget about it, and
if it hadn't paid full-time wages, we would have... I like to think I still would have got it to what I would have called 1.0, but I think it would have been a different 1.0 than what we're at now.
Yeah. I mean, because we were happy with the interface at the time, which we'd designed, and now it just looks like a joke. It was so bad. And then it was only afterwards when we kind of had seen it was going to be a big thing. We thought, okay, how about we hire an artist?
That was all done before early access. We got the new interface in before early access.
Oh, that's right. That was greenlight when we got Jamie on board, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, what do you guys attribute? I guess the success. I mean, other than the game being really good, because it obviously is. What do you attribute the success to? Was it the early access? Was it just the general word of mouth? How was I guess I wasn't paying attention at the time necessarily, but what was the critical response like? What were people, making videos of it or anything like that? What kind of made snowball like that?
We've always had a really strong word of mouth factor, I suppose. That's always been a very, very big thing. It's just, and I think also mainstream press. It's a game that you can write an article about for a non-gaming audience, which is fantastic. Because if it's just a game about exploring dungeons or whatever, they can of course still be hugely successful, but you're not going to hit that kind of mainstream thing. But I mean, of course, a game like that won't really want that anyway. So that's always been a thing that's worked in our favour. I think also the fact we're making a game about things that many people understand and sort of have a relationship with already. It's almost like we're in a franchise. We kind of sort of borrow people's understanding of a thing and we're just making a game with it. So then they have this understanding about what the map means and what it looks like based on their experiences actually engaging with them. So that, I feel, has been a really big factor in our success. If we'd made the same game, but but the art didn't make it look like an intro map, I don't think it would be anywhere near as successful. If it was just a completely...
Just an abstract
Yeah.
supply X to Y.
I don't think it would have worked.
Well, I think there is a combination of the art style and the music and the general premise that can, attract people that don't necessarily play games. Because my girlfriend, who doesn't play a lot of video games, discovered it and was instantly taken by it, which is actually how I found out about it. So, and I'm in video games, and I write about them and I play many of them, but I found it through her, and then it just immediately consumed us. We play all the time, and do little competitions and stuff like that. So, so I just think there's something really kind of, I guess simple might be doing it a disservice, but I mean something there, something within that realm of how it plays and looks that just translates to everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been, as much as you try not to, we've been sort of trying to figure out why it has been successful and what
Sure.
can take from it.
Yeah.
So, but it's such a dangerous occupation to try to reverse engineer why the success of something. Because we have a number of theories as to why it worked. But you don't know whether any of those are actually are actually accurate, or did it succeed in spite of them, or can you use any of these independently, or is it only when they overlap that you get something like this? And so I always get really sketchy about, I'm very hesitant to comment with any authority on I think it was successful.
Yeah, that's funny. It's cool too. I've seen multiple articles of I think Waypoint Advice did one recently where it was using the game to explain transit concepts and stuff like that. I've seen a lot of cool stuff like that too. I think Austin Walker, their editor-in-chief over there, is a big fan of the game too. So
right. I didn't realize that. That's awesome.
No, I remember when they emailed about the article, because they were hoping to get I think it was the Hong Kong Transit Authority,
right?
to comment on the game, and how accurate it is as a metro simulation. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out, but no, we did get a lot of feedback from transit planners and stuff, which was it's also very scary when we started getting these emails, because ordinarily when you're really into a certain thing and then all of a sudden there's a TV show or a book or a game or whatever that focuses heavily on your thing, it can be or you're just horrified by all the things they get wrong.
Right.
And I thought we'd get the same. People are like, this is the most idiotic representation of urban transit planning I've ever seen. But actually, it got received pretty well, which I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, I mean, do you guys?
Yeah.
Do you guys like trains, or do you know a lot about trains, or was it just kind of?
We've since discovered that people are really into maps and this kind of thing.
It's it isn't like we don't like them. It's just we're not.
Sure.
We got into it because it met a lot of constraints. That's basically the reason we got involved. So to have these subject matter experts pour over your work that is a total. Someone who doesn't really understand, who hasn't looked that closely at the concept, it's terrifying. It's like the teacher looking over the homework he didn't spend any
really study
time.
or
he can't at all.
And I just like the way the maps look. That was all.
Well, it did, It felt like we did this very superficial work about trains, and all of a sudden these people who've spent their careers, their careers are in this thing, are analysing it, and I think they don't rip us a new one over it.
Well, I think that, not that you guys probably aren't accurate to a degree, because these people have said you are, But I think the art style and the format of the game is abstract enough for people to be like a little more forgiving. Like if you were making those like farming, I think there literally is a train simulator, those kinds of games, and if it was like totally like not right, then people would be probably more critical. But I think your style it kind of communicates this is a representation, and if it's close, then that feels like it's very accurate because you're not trying to get the gritty details right. That was never part of the goal. I think that's communicated by the game itself.
Yeah, I definitely think that we also have to say that we're kind of about building a map, not about an intro. Right. So, like, the map looks fine. It might not, but the actual network that the gameplay is about might not be as accurate as it should be. But, that's okay.
It can be what the comments we usually get on it are that it's obviously not trying to be a realistic simulation, but it's useful to teach concepts at a high abstract level.
Yeah.
And also just get people interested as well. Like that's not something that is a useful thing sometimes, just to get people interested in a certain thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I learned about the just the terrain, I guess, or the what certain areas of certain cities and countries look like, just in a general shape idea. And do you guys use the actual subway colors for each city, right?
Yeah,
or train.
Yeah.
And we try.
Because I mean, I know the New York ones, and I am like, those are right, but I wouldn't know the other ones. But that's cool too. Like I think that's a cool attention to detail, and so I mean, I learned a little bit more and got interested, just from playing it. So.
Oh, cool.
I think that worked. So what's? I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but what's next for the studio and you guys?
Well, we've got some big updates coming for the rest of the year. I think we've got 3 updates scheduled for 2017,
something like that.
Yeah, so the big one's coming in May, and then there's 2 more later on.
Somewhat,
we don't know.
Yeah, scheduled later on.
Yeah, so we are still very much actively supporting it. We're kicking off a new project in June. That's going to be it's going to be very different. Well, it's different in some aspects, not so much in others. It's going to be a story-based puzzle game. So we're kind of working with some artists and a narrative designer as well. So it's going to be a very different look and experience, I think, for us.
Yeah, so the only other thing I wanted to ask about was what does the New Zealand game dev community look like? Is it growing? Like, where do you guys fit in it and feel like in it? That's not something I have any concept for.
Right. So the studio that we began working for, I think they're going to be 2 decades old this year. So they've been really kind of a foundation of the community here in Wellington. Basically, every indie around here, or every sort of studio has their seeds inside that studio. So the fact they've been around for so long, I think, has really helped just
give some stability.
Yeah, and give a place for people to really learn the skills. So as I said earlier, there are about 80 to 100. There are 2 studios within about half an hour of here that are 25, hoping to be about 50 or so by the end of next year. Then there's a whole bunch of indies.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think all of New Zealand wide, there's probably a dozen studios of at least a dozen people.
Yeah, well, there are some big ones. So, I mean, there's because Dean Hall came back to
right,
and he's now they've had Rocketworks has been around for a couple of years.
Yeah, and they're about 25, hoping to be.
Yeah, I think they're always expanding.
I think they're hoping to be 100 by the end of the year.
Yeah,
they're just going up and up and up.
Yeah, so they just got funding from Tencent?
Yes, it was from Tencent.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, he's got a lot of influence, I guess, to the DayZ. And
so that was, he's obviously had a big impact, when he came back. So they're working on a whole bunch of unannounced projects. Has EGX Reds, because they were going to unveil one of their projects at EGX Reds.
I don't think that's happened yet, because that's the BAFTA weekend, and we haven't heard who's
right.
won the BAFTAs
Okay,
yet.
so yeah, they'll be announcing one of their games in the next few weeks, which is pretty cool, because they're working on a whole bunch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Last time I was down there, that they're working on 3 separate games. Yeah. I don't think any of which have been announced yet. But
yeah. And then up in Auckland, there's the Path of Exile devs who are about 80 or so. And
no, I think they're almost 100 now.
Right.
They just keep expanding. It's crazy. Yeah.
And a few other big studios, and then in Christchurch there's Digital Confectioners who do the Shit Jart game.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and the community's really come together. I think the last few years there's been more of a movement to get people talking to each other and more involved, and now there are more events around the country.
I think, I do think about 2 or 3 years ago, it kind of everyone just sort of became aware of how big the community here actually was. Like, I think because everyone just thought it was just like us, and then like a handful of other. Yeah, but actually there's heaps of other indie developers just doing their own thing, which is great. Yeah, so I think all up is several hundred people in the industry. But
we should know. The
New
Zealand Game Developers Association does have all sorts of stuff on this. I think there's
it's
200 to 300 people involved.
It must be bigger than that. I think it's like 500.
It's interesting because there's so much culture, I guess, coming out of New Zealand, and especially recently, and it's cool that the game community is kind of following suit as well in that.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that the Game Developers Association really wants to push is that we do. The NZ has got a very strong sort of output, and that games aren't really. I don't think we're really pulling our weight as much as we really should be in the economy.
Film industry here is huge in comparison. So it's a very game industry is always trying to compete with that.
Right.
So we have 475 jobs in the industry right now inside New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think in the Australian industry, we're about 80% of the size of the Australian industry, and they are, as a country, 5 times as big as us. So we do seem to be doing all right compared to kind of others, but it is still a very small industry. It's under $100 million every year that we make. So I mean, it's sizable, but I mean, compared to other things.
Well, sure, it's all relative.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's growing. Yes,
it is.
An important thing too. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation, guys.
Cool. Thanks very much for having us. It's been great.
Wasn't that great? Even though I listened to it back after editing it, I'm like, that wasn't the way I thought it was. Not that I thought it was bad. I just thought I was being way more dumb and kind of loopy. But I sound normal, I think. Maybe that's just me normally as being dumb and loopy, so I can't even distinguish the two. But anyways, thank you again to Peter and Robert. Again, check out Mini Metro. It's on mobile now, I believe, and Steam, and it's a fantastic game. So, and keep your eyes peeled for whatever they do next. Next time, who knows? We're going to probably have a brief hiatus again, because there is a guest that I'm in talks with that I'm very excited about. Other than that, there's other people in the works all the time, but you know how it goes, schedules and just even getting in touch with someone at all is a tough process. So to help that along, give me some suggestions or reach out to people or whatever. to come on this here podcast. I've reached, I don't even know if I ever mentioned this, but I reached like the year mark in beginning of January, and it didn't feel like something I needed to celebrate because it's 1 year, first of all, and second of all, I only done half the amount of episodes that I really had wanted to do by a year. Almost exactly, I think, actually, because 52 weeks in a year, and I did around that time 26 or so. So I didn't feel like celebrating, but that's still a pretty big mark. I mean, I'm still going. Hopefully, we can get it back to that weekly schedule. It's just it's partly me and partly just getting enough attention on the show and getting the right people involved that want to do it. So, on the social medias, do the stuff where you share and let people know what you think. Facebook, the podcast is Butterfly Effect Podcast. YouTube, Butterfly Effect Podcast as well. Twitter is Butterfly Pod. I'm on Twitter at Ettletod, ETTLETODD. And you can email me at trettleman@gmail.com, trettleman@gmail.com. And with suggestions, feedback, what have you, whatever you want. Your life story, maybe not that. But, I think that's about it. Just support the show any way you can, and maybe try to get some other people too as well. I really do want to hear suggestions. I want more female voices on this show, and that is not something that would be apparent by my roster of people I've talked to, and I would say that that's not for a lack of trying, and that's true. But obviously, I can do better. I want some more female voices. Send me some recommendations, and I'll do some more research on my own, of course. I've developed a system where when I reach out to someone, I reach out to a man, then a woman, a man, then a woman. So at least making it equal. And I didn't necessarily always do that. I just kind of, when I first started, was just going, people I like. And I was like, wow, all these guys are cool, but it's all men. It's all white men at that, too. So I want to diversify. Let's do it somehow. Help me out. I want to be better. Anyways, I think that's it. Keep up with all the social media channels and all those things. And I'll see you next time, whenever that may be. Hopefully pretty soon, fingers crossed. See ya.